Our listening audience has heard us talk many times about UN Agenda 21. And of course, it was an agenda for the 21st century to control populations, to confine them to megacities, to keep them off the land and otherwise control them. There's another UN agenda. I guess we should call this one INVASION-21. This is a document we're going to take a look at right now from the year 2000. And what this shows is what many of us have been talking about. Many people have called it the Great People Replacement. Well, they were talking about that 17 years ago. It was a plan. We've seen this, and they've sold it to us as a reaction to events like wars, which in many cases we create. But they sold it as a reaction to war, to other catastrophes. But no, it was their plan all along. So we're going to take a look at that because this is truly warfare against Western civilization, the last bulwark against global governance. So let's take a look at this article here from WND. They look at the plot to replace Europeans with refugees. And they say this is a UN document from 2000. It's called Replacement Migration. Is it a solution to declining and aging populations? That's the UN's document. And we'll take a look at that in just a moment. It details plunging birth rates across Europe and, of course, also in the US and Japan. And it identifies a solution to those declining birth rates: mass immigration that you're now seeing. They say without the migration of populations from the developing world, it reasons, economies will suffer because of labor shortages and falling tax revenues. According to the UN documents, the meeting was attended by a host of government and non-governmental organizations and individuals. You know, those people that they like to call shareholders or stakeholders. That's what they call them. I can think either way. They're the ones who are going to own everything. You are going to be the property. And those are the types of people that we see attending these events like Bilderberg and others, that some of them public, some of them secret. Some of these organizations were the International Organization for Migration. That's a UN group. And it said that mass migration is not only, quote, inevitable, but necessary. Also, the UN Population Fund, a group dedicated to family planning, in other words, depopulation, and the spread of contraceptives. So they talk about this. At the same time, they say, well, you know, we got to solve this problem. There's too much of a falling birth rate in the West while they're still pushing family planning. It's not about that. And it's not about saving the entitlement programs that the bankers and the government workers have pushed on Americans and those in developing countries. It was the IMF that was accused of rent seeking when they stopped encouraging third world countries to invest in their infrastructure and to start borrowing money for their social programs. And that's where we are today. And of course, this is the next step. They said immigrants will not prevent the long-run aging of the population, except in the highly unlikely scenario of a 10-fold increase in annual immigration levels. There we go. That's what they want. And that's what we're seeing now. Let's take a look at the document itself. From the UN. Replacement migration, is it a solution to declining and aging populations? And this is the way it begins. They say the UN projections indicate that over the next 50 years, the populations of virtually all countries of Europe, as well as Japan, will face population decline and population aging. They say, taking a look at this, we see that we need to have replacement migration for 8 low fertility countries. And I name them: France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Republic of Korea, that's South Korea, Russian Federation, United Kingdom, and the United States. That includes us, folks. And then they specifically focus on Europe. They say 2 regions, Europe and the European Union. They go on to say replacement migration refers to the international migration that a country would need to offset population decline and population aging resulting from low fertility and mortality rates. Now, if you think that this is all of this that is happening, as we see in Europe, they say, we've got to bring these refugees in. This is a crisis. No, it was a plan, a 17-year-old plan. They laid it out here in the documents. You have to understand, it's not an accident. It's not a reaction to what is happening. And it is not even a solution to what they're concerned about. They point out in the one on the United States, this is subtitle of this UN document, they say, except for a temporary period in the late 1970s and 1980s, when it hovered around 1.8, the total fertility rate for the United States has continued to be around 2 children per woman. Life expectancy at birth, meanwhile, has risen from 69 years in 1950 to 55 to 75.7 years in 1990 to 95. As a consequence, the proportion of the population that is aged 65 and older, That's what they're talking about, Social Security, folks. And remember, it was Bismarck who was the leader of Germany, same guy that said, you don't want to see how laws are made, for the same reason you don't want to see how sausage is made. They've been hiding their agenda from you, folks. This is their agenda, their INVASION-21 agenda, if we want to talk about it that way. And, of course, he was the one who put forward Social Security the first time. He did it in Germany, and he picked the age of 65. Why? Because that was the life expectancy. So they were going to tell everybody, don't worry, we're going to take care of you in your old age, picking a date at which they're going to start giving the cash out, which was beyond what they expected you to live. That is the lie that Social Security has been all along. And so, yeah, they do have a demographic problem. As people live longer, now they can't pay out because it was nothing but a Ponzi scheme. They say in order to keep the total population constant, it would be necessary to have 6.4 million migrants between 2030 and 2050, which is an average of 319,000 per year. And they go on and say, in the absence of migration, figures show that it would be necessary to raise the upper limit of the working age to 66.9 years. You know, they're going to do both. That's what I wrote down on my notes. They're going to do both of these. They're going to raise the retirement age, and they're going to flood us with migrants, because that is simply an excuse to bring the migrants in. As I said before, they want to use this as an invading army. They need to reduce our economy to third world levels. They need to take away our culture and our climate of laws so that they can enact their own global governance. We're the people who stand in their way. And that's why they need to level and homogenize the West. This is the way they're implementing it. The EU is there as a subunit of global governance. It's there to consolidate the European countries so they can then be subsumed into a world governance. They're all connected. The open borders, these secret economic agreements that would control our economies from a foreign, unaccountable committee that is not elected or accountable to any of the nations, that had to be stopped. Very important to stop that. And of course, the other part of that was the climate agreement. And remember, this is not an emergency. This was a plan 17 years ago, a massive a plan to bring people in. They create wars, and that is a real case, but they do that as a method to give them an excuse, a pretext for bringing these people in. It was always their plan to do this anyway, but they needed to have a reason. So they manufactured the reason. They manufactured a war. Polish Prime Minister has said that Poland, quote, will not participate in the Brussels elite's folly. That's precisely it, folks. And it's not just the Brussels elite. It is the UN agenda that Brussels is implementing. Polish Interior Minister believes the threat from migrants is much worse than any threat of European sanctions. And he's absolutely right. They said you can no longer speak about immigration, but only about an invasion. And that is coming from Italy. He says it is organized and funded and planned by Brussels with the complicity of Rome. He's the leader of Italy's populist Northern League Party who said that in May. Now, I want to play a video for you here. This is a video that was produced by the United Nations, and it shows this mass migration that we're talking about. They call it Operation Triton. Let's go ahead and roll that video there, and we'll play that. As you see, this is a very dramatic, very heartwarming, visceral experience showing people coming in boats into Europe, and there's the mass of people. They say Italy is seeking to revise this Operation Triton, a border security effort that rescues migrants from sinking boats so that fewer of them are allowed to land in Italy. So what they're saying is we're going to work with Italy to stop this. But this is the propaganda that you're watching right now. They're ignored, they're grateful, but they're skilled. They're going to take care of you. They're going to support and pay for your Social Security because they're so ambitious and successful. And they're human. Yes, they are human, but they do have a country. And we can help them in that country without destroying our culture, our civilization, and without impoverishing ourselves into the third world. They point out in the article, migrants have become so unpopular in Italy that the mayor of Castel Umberto in Sicily recently led a revolt to prevent a few dozen migrants from taking up residence in an abandoned hotel. See, this is what is happening. They're taking us down to a third world level. And Bill Nye just points out what's going on here. He says, we have to wait for the climate deniers to die off. See, this is the third leg of the globalist plan to take over our world. And this is what he had to say. He said, it sounds like people are scared. It just sounds like people are afraid. And the people who are afraid in general, with due respect, and I'm now one of them, are older. Climate change deniers, by way of example, are older. It's generational. So we're just going to have to wait for those people to age out, as they say. Age out is a euphemism for die. Now, this is the way they operate, folks. They take the long view. And since I left high school, they have been pushing successive generations increasingly into this climate fear, indoctrinating them, propagandizing them. That is the purpose of government control of the schools. It is not to make independent thinkers. It is not to give you the tools of education. It is to make you dependent on the government, to get you to swallow whatever narrative they are selling you at the moment. And the narrative that they're selling everybody is climate change or global warming. They had to change it to climate change. And they're saying it's not going to work for the older people, but it will eventually happen because the children belong to them. They've had the children from a very early age, and they've been teaching your children, if you put them in a government institution, they've been teaching them to worship the environment, to worship the earth, telling them that a catastrophe is coming, and the only way that we can avoid that is to shut down Western society, to shut down our energy, to enter a new dark age, quite literally a dark age. Turn out the lights, folks. It's over. And we're going to reduce your population. We're going to control everything that you have to say.